Hi. So today I thought I'd talk about what makes a really good mixer do what they do. How do they do what they do? What can I maybe impart to you that would be helpful to you in terms of understanding what it is that's different between somebody who's really good at mixing and maybe somebody that's learning and on their journey to that. Like, what's the difference and what's the essence of it, I guess. So in case you're wondering, like, why listen to me, have a look at the video description and you can see I've done quite a lot. I've had quite a lot of accolades, mixed some amazing albums, and I've got decades of experience. So before we get started, if you can like the video and subscribe and press the thanks button, those things are all really helpful to keep this channel going and really appreciate it. Okay. I'm going to start by talking about, I'm going to kind of break it down into three elements here. So first of all, there is really nothing about the tools that you have, as long as your tools are good enough, that makes or breaks a great mix. So these days we've got all kinds of amazing plugins. You may or may not have hardware, but that's not the main thing. It's a mistake to get caught up in thinking, I really need like the best plugins. I need just that perfect thing that this new plugin or this new piece of hardware is going to give me. That's really what's going to make the difference to my mixes sounding great. It really isn't. A great mixer, or a very good mixer, can make a great mix with whatever they've got available. Honestly, with stock plugins. If I had to use stock plugins, I could still get pretty much the same result. Okay, there would be a difference between that and having either some really high-end plugins at my disposal or some really high-end hardware, but that difference would be pretty subtle. It would be pretty small. It wouldn't be a big difference. The mix would still be the mix. So it's really not about those things. That's the very fine patina, or the very fine level of difference. And the big difference with which plugins you use, in my view, is bringing us on to the second part of this kind of three-part, how I'm breaking down in three parts. So the second part is workflow. Workflow is really vital, and understanding how to prioritize your workflow, what the priorities there are. And that's where plugins and hardware can really come into their own. So I could start with a compressor that could do almost anything, like this Pro C2. It's got a huge range of available things it can do. You know, it's got a lot of different styles which have a lot of built-in things about how it reacts. And it's got a big range of controls, and you know, I could craft that snare sound I want. If I wanted a really snap, punchy, thick sound with some weight to it, say that's what I was after, I'm sure I could craft something around there. So start with a preset, and then I might get there, but it would take some time. Or something like this, the Unison, the Tone Products Unison. This is an amazing compressor, and it can emulate many different types of compressor types, and within that it's got a huge range of controls, so you could craft many different styles of compression with this. And for mastering, I find this invaluable. It's one of the best mastering compressors out there, I think. It's fantastic, and it equally could be used on any single instrument, and I'm sure I could dial in a really snappy, punchy, thick snare sound with this. But you know, I can just simply go for this, and I'm going to get it with a few turns of the dial. You know, a few clicks and just dial in the right amount of gain, and it's there, that sound. Or a slightly different version of that punchy, thick, snappy sound. I can go for something like this, a FET compressor like this one, and it's very similar to an 1176, but I find it a little bit more controllable. Very quick. I can just get the right gain and move the attack and release, and it's there. So it's going to be a lot quicker for me to get to where I need to go, in most cases, just by grabbing a tool that I know what it does. Now, I may not want that kind of snare sound, but I'm just giving it as an example. It makes much more sense to me to use these kind of tools, which I know it's going to do a certain thing, and it does it really well, and I can just grab it when I need it. And you know, it's the same thing of here. I mean, I've actually got a high pass here, but just imagine that this wasn't a high pass. I could sculpt my snare sound with this by creating a bunch of nodes and, you know, moving them around and, you know, and getting the cue and the slope and everything just right, so that I just, you know, I got it just how I wanted it and so forth. But it's so much quicker for me to just grab this, because I know exactly how this sounds. I know that I can just go straight here and pull up the right amount of top end snappiness that I want. I can know where to pull out here to get, you know, for a snare, to get rid of any boxiness, and I know how to pull up a bit of the low end weight of it. These EQs just, they're great at that. You know, I know exactly where to go, and within a few moves, and we're talking about, you know, less than a minute, seconds, I can pull up roughly the snare sound I want. Whereas here, it's going to take me longer, and I'll probably get there in the end, but it just doesn't make any sense for me to mix with something like this when I, you know, with a snare sound, when I can just grab this and I'm just there almost immediately. Same with the compression. I mean, yes, these things are amazing, and you can do things with these that you could never do with an analog compressor. But, you know, I can just grab this for a snare sound. This is very likely going to get me there so much quicker than something like this. So workflow is really important. If I have to spend ages messing with this for a snare sound or a bass sound, I'm probably going to lose my flow. Whereas if I can just grab the compressor that I know is going to already get me there with just almost immediately and move on, and I can get that whole mix to come together and get that workflow, that creative flow of not getting stuck with spending 10 minutes or longer working on a certain sound. Before I know, I've lost the perspective, I've lost the flow of pulling together the emotion and the overall greater than the sum of its parts feel of the mix. This does like one or two things really well. It doesn't mean it just works on snare. I mean, it works on many instruments, but it has a sound and it does certain things really, really well. But there's many, many things it can't do, and it's exactly the same with this. It does a few things really brilliantly, but there's many things it can't do. You know, with this, you can do pretty much anything. And so there are many mixing tasks where I rely on compressors like this. But in terms of getting that, especially in mastering, but when it comes to getting that workflow and moving quickly, these kinds of things can be really useful. Now, these days, stock plugins have things like this too, and you know, the differences maybe, you know, they're fairly subtle. There will be differences, but you can still get there. You can still get to that same sort of place pretty quick. Workflow is incredibly important. What you'll find, I think, with most high-end mixers, or most very skilled mixers, is that they move pretty fast. They get from the basic starting point to fairly close to the mix they want pretty quickly. And this is what I mean by workflow. You need to get a flow going, literally a flow, a creative flow going. And you want to get somewhere close to that mix pretty quickly. You don't want to spend, you know, an hour working on a kick drum sound. You want to get that pretty quick. So, you know, if I know what kind of kick drum sound I want and I listen to the mix and I think, well, that kick drum's way off, I'll go in and I'll quickly get it pretty close to where I need it to be. And that requires me knowing what tools. I don't want to be experimenting. I want to think, okay, I know what's going to do that. So I get that kick drum sounding pretty close to what I want really quickly in, you know, I don't know, 3 minutes, maybe less. And then I move, and then I'm hearing the whole mix. I've not lost that flow of pulling the mix together and thinking, okay, what's not working here? What do I need to change? And, you know, jump again over to maybe the guitars, and I think, okay, the guitars are just way off. And I'll pull those together into something that's working for me pretty quick. And I know what tools will get me there. Maybe it's going to be, you know, a certain EQ, because I realize I've got to shave the top off of them because they're super fizzy or something, and that's getting in the way of everything. Or maybe they're just so forward that I need to pull them back a little bit, using some early reflections or some reverb or something like that. It could be a whole range of different things that I need to do to get those guitars roughly where I need them to be. But I'm not going to spend the time to get them perfect, or the kick drum perfect, roughly in there. Moving on to thinking, okay, now what do I need to pull to the forefront here? Now I've got those things that were causing a big problem sorted. I need to pull the vocal into the center here, or I need to solidify the impact of the drums, or I need to bring the solos forward, whatever it might be. It could be a million different things. And then once you've got that and you think this is really happening, probably have a break and then come back and go and start refining. So you think, okay, this is sounding good, but I think that initial kick drum sound I got, you know, was maybe a little bit too clicky. It's sticking out a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of pull back a little bit on that and see if I can just pull that out. Or maybe, you know, I just want a little bit, you know, change the low end tone a little bit. So it's talking about small moves, and maybe the snare, you know, again, the snare is maybe just needs a little bit more body, you know, and so you're just going to start tweaking a little bit just to fine tune things. But it's really important that at this stage, you don't get caught up in, getting lost. You don't sit, okay, I'm going to tweak the snare a little bit because it's just poking out a little bit too much, or it's not kind of poking out enough, or whatever you feel isn't quite right. You don't want to get caught up in it's like, well, actually, maybe I'm going to really recraft this snare sound from scratch. You know, oh, this is good. Oh, maybe I could go like this. Maybe this would be good, you know, because before you know it, you're lost. And that big change you've made is going to resonate across the whole mix, and everything's going to have to change, or may have to change. The whole drum sound may not have what it had. So at this second stage, you need to be careful. You're doing small changes, and only make big changes if you take a break and come back and think, well, this really isn't working. The snare sound's really just not right. Okay, you might have to spend more time on something like that if you feel like you did lose perspective a bit when you're doing your original mix and you got something wrong. But that aside, it's really important that you don't get caught up and lost in changing things too much, or, you know, getting caught up in too many, you know, losing the overall picture. And, you know, you might have a third, even a fourth, but each time you do that, if you've done the mix right, you should be doing less. If you're getting caught up in like huge amounts of revisions and getting stuck in messing with the snare sound for ages on your third revision, just question yourself and think, is this still working as it was? Am I still getting this feeling? Because hopefully you're just honing in. Keep in mind again that many of the great classic mixes were done on analog gear where none of this revision stuff was possible. It was all done in one mixing session. So there wasn't the possibility to go back and revisit and tweak and tweak and tweak. And it's the danger, you know, there's huge power in having it in software in front of you like this and having revisions, but there's also a huge danger of getting caught up in infinite revisions and never finishing, and losing your perspective is the big one. And that brings us on to the third thing, stage 3. So this is knowing what you're after, basically, which in some ways is the hard bit. It's the bit that you can't just learn from a YouTube video. And that is knowing what you want. And that I would break down into kind of a couple of ways of talking about that. One is that you need to spend thousands of hours listening to music. There's just no way around that. And when you listen to the music, I would say it's important not to hone in on the tiny details all the time. I mean, we all do that, and it's necessary, and it's fine to listen to think, oh, I'm really honing in on the sound of that particular kick drum or that particular synth sound and all of that. That's fine. Kind of geeking out on that level is we all do it, and it's part of it. But it's really important not to miss the big picture, which is what this third part is all about. It's that big picture of what is making this really work as a whole. All those tiny details that you can get caught up into, somehow they're coming together as a whole. The listener's not going to hear those details. They're going to get an impact from this song. They're going to get an emotional impact. They're going to get a meaning, the meaning of the song. They're going to get an emotional journey from this song. What gives that? What brings that together? All those tiny details are just they're playing their little part together. The sum is greater than the parts, is what I'm trying to say here. And that's what the bigger picture listening is about. If you're listening to, the thousands of hours of music you need to do, you need to be thinking about that. What are these sounds pulling together for me? What am I getting from this music? What emotional valence is the word that comes to mind, but that may not mean anything to everybody. But the emotional kind of impact or the emotional meaning of the song. Because let's face it, that's what music is. It's a language of emotion. The long and short of it, I mean, you could say that there are exceptions to that, but in the whole, music is about the language of emotion. You're getting an emotional meaning from it, an impact, a meaning. It could be very subtle, it could be very strong. There's a million variations, but in the end, it is the human being's language of emotion. Is what you could say music is in sound form. So, or at least that's how I see it. So if you're listening on that kind of bigger level, higher level, broader level, what is that music giving you? And what is it about the sound that's giving you that? What is it about the sum of the parts, not the details? And then when you actually bring that personal, creative, you could say even artistic side to the mix, because there is an art to mixing, you're bringing all of that. You're bringing your understanding of the genres that you work in and what it is about the sounds that help bring forward the meaning of the song, and you're bringing your personal taste. So the final, I said this last part was going to kind of break it into two parts, and the second part of that is that you do have a taste in things. So you could have a song which one mixer could bring the meaning of that song forward by mixing in one way, and another mixer could equally bring the meaning of that song forward with a different kind of mix. There isn't necessarily just one type of mix that will really make that music speak its best. There can be more than one. So hopefully the client that's hired you has hired you because they know what you do. They know what kind of music you work with. They know your mixes. They know what they sound like. They know what your taste is. And so hopefully there's a match there. So there is a whole other element to this, which is working with clients, which maybe I'll do another video on, which is just as important as all of this in many cases. There are some artists that will just give you the music, they know what you do, and they'll let you just get on with it because they know that you're going to come up with something that they like, and then they might make some minor tweaks, but basically they give you the artistic license to just mix it. But many artists want to have a big say in it, and you need to be able to work closely with them to get it to sound exactly how they want it to sound. And that's, that's a whole area in itself that's vitally important for any professional mixer to be good at. And that's maybe something I can cover in another video. Of mixing at a high level, and I'm just going to repeat them again. One is, it's not about the tools. As long as you've got decent tools, it doesn't matter exactly which ones you have. It's really not about that, so don't get caught up in all of that. The tools are more about workflow, and workflow is the second big thing. Establishing a workflow and understanding the priorities of a good workflow are essential. To get a good mix, it's about the flow and the speed with which you do it that helps that come together. If you get distracted and stopped and sidetracked and interrupted by a million little things too much, and you lose that flow, your mix is not going to come together as well, and you probably lose perspective, and it just won't be as good. 3 is the big picture. How do you bring the meaning and emotion of that song forward? And there's 2 parts of that, and the second part we're looking at now is your taste. So the first part is listening to thousands of hours of music with that big picture view. The second part is your taste. So, for example, I like certain kick drum sounds. I don't like just one kick drum sound. There's a range of kick drum sounds I really like, from really clicky to really soft. And there's a whole range of click drum sounds I really don't like. But some other mixer might really like them, and they can make them sound great. This is the interesting bit, is that I can hear a great mix from a mixer I really like, and it sounds fantastic. Every part of it sounds fantastic. But when I hone in on the kick drum sound, it's like, I'd never use that kick drum sound. I just don't like that kind of kick drum sound. But in the context, it sounds perfect because their whole vision's fitting together. So it's the same with every mixer. You have a certain taste, you have a certain range of sounds. Certain guitar sounds I really like, certain guitar sounds I don't like so much. Same with every instrument, with bass and synth and so forth. So that taste is part of your mixing. And of course you need to keep the bigger picture there. That's always got to be the primary thing. So I might have a certain bass sound I like, or a certain snare sound I like. But if that's not what the song needs, or it's not really working, always have to put the overall picture first, absolutely paramount. So I might put together a drum sound and think, this is sounding great. I really pulled together a snare sound I just absolutely love. Whole thing sounded great. But then I sit back, bigger picture, actually that snare's just, it's not supporting the main focus of the music. It's distracting from it. It's not providing what that music actually needs for that emotional impact. It's a wonderful snare sound, but it's actually drawing your ear too much. Or maybe it's not providing the right kind of support rhythmically that the music needs. Maybe it needs to have a less top end. Maybe it needs to have more top end, or more or less low end, in order to provide the support or the rhythmic detail necessary, even though that pulls it away from your ideal snare sound. So the big picture always has to lead, but your taste is a big part of it. There are lots of snare sounds you could potentially move towards. So those are going to be snare sounds that are in your wheelhouse. Those are going to be snare sounds that are part of your taste that you're going to go for. You're not going to go for a snare sound which you just really don't like, that kind of snare sound. That's another mixer, if you see what I mean. So it's a combination of the big picture and your taste. So again, don't shy away from your taste. Don't be afraid of your taste. I would say your taste is partly what makes you unique, and what makes your mixing style what it is. It's your taste and the choices that you're likely to make over other choices, the kind of sounds you tend to like. And that big picture, again, is going to be more unique to you. So yeah, I hope you found this useful. I hope it'll be useful to you in maybe moving further to where you want to be. I know if I'd been told this when I was learning and working my way up. It would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of effort. It would have really helped me a lot when I was younger. So, or, you know, even if you're not young, but you're on your journey, then I hope this will help you. Yeah, if you found this useful, please do give the video a like and subscribe, and press the thanks buttons. Really helpful for keeping the channel going. And yeah, I hope to see you next time.